I'm gonna begin this now. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are very pleased to have Dave Lowry join us this morning, who's the general manager of Interfor Pacific at the Port Angeles division. And some of his staff is here as well. Chandy, who's HR, and Ron Hearn, who is Interfor's log buyer. And if I've forgotten anybody else, Dave, you can introduce them. Just some housekeeping items. Please put yourself on mute. And just so we don't pick up any background noise. And if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat if you'd like, and I can call on you to ask your question. You could just ask me to do it. I see we already have one question, but we'll let Dave kick it off, and this will be recorded and posted onto our website later on today. I also see we have I'm blanking here, but Konopasky from AFRC, American Forest Resource Center, with us as well. So thanks for joining us. And of course, our House Representative Mike Chapman. So thank you for joining us also, Mike. And Randy Johnson, one of our 3 county commissioners. So with that, Dave, I will let you take it. And again, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll just start off here. This is just a high-level look at the history of the Interfor division here at Port Angeles from where it started. So in the Northwest, of course, we have 4 mills currently. Previously, when I first got here, we had a mill in Gilcrest. We have sold that mill and purchased another mill from Georgia Pacific in Philomath. That's a fairly recent addition to the team. We have a stud mill in Molalla. Philomath is a dimension mill. Longview is a stud mill as well, all green. And then, of course, Port Angeles division here, it's studs as well. The mill here on this site was built in 1998. That was originally Crown Pacific. Interfor acquired the mill in 2004. And you can see here in 2005, 2007, up till present, quite a bit of capital invested in the mill to get it up to modern standards and get it to the level of production it is at today, which is significantly more than it originally started out at. 64-acre site. We typically target, 50-50 on the species, hemlock and Doug fir. Any of the other species, spruce, alder, so on and so forth, we source that out to either PA hardwood, Alta, so on and so forth. So we just handle the hemlock and Doug fir. From what I understand, the mix out there in the woods is about 70% hemlock and 30% Doug fir. And Ron's done a real good job of getting us more Doug fir than we have hemlock. So we're about 2/3 Doug fir and about 1/3 hemlock as we run through the mill. And a lot of it has to do with our drying constraints, which I'll talk to further in the presentation. So 2x4, 2x6 studs, anywhere from 6 feet to 4 meters in length. Although we haven't made 4 meter for quite some time, we do precision end trim and metric export if needed. We run 80-hour operating capacity, about 200 million feet per year. We did 201 last year, which is the most wood that the mill has produced to date. We are constrained on the drying, as it said in the kilns, at about 160 million feet a year. We have 126 employees, 105 hourly, 21 salary, although we are increasing that head count here, especially on the salary side, as we get more paperwork and things, regulations, as the world changes, so on and so forth, just takes more resources. We do utilize our custom drying at Port Angeles Hardwood, a great partner with us, and that helps us offset our kiln constraints. Most of our shipments, we target the I-5 corridor in Tacoma. We have a reload there to get the bulk of our wood onto rail. Of course, there's no rail service on the peninsula, so that's where our first opportunity is to get it on the rail and get it out. We do ship across the United States, but we do try to target, markets that are closer just for freight costs. Some of the investment history, there in 2005, updated the planer, trimmer, grade scanner, kiln upgrades. That's about $6 million. In 2007, that's probably the biggest investment there. That's when we put in our head rig, Optimill DLI line, new merchandising system, what we call the log factory, and a gill bear planer to increase our production there. Lug loader, sorter modification, DLI scanner upgrades, those things are, $5 million there for a total of 43. Over the years, a lot of our capital these days really is focused around maintenance and just keeping the mill up ship shape and keeping up with the latest technology. Product mix, most of it's stud, 89%, 11% of it goes to, the big box stores, homes, Home Depot, Lowe's, and that kind of stuff. Majority of it here is in the Pacific Northwest. We do send some to the South, U.S. inland, so on and so forth. We do shipments to Texas, go across to Idaho, so on and so forth. Here's some of the high level on the fiber supply, and Ron can jump in here if there's more detail or questions about this. So our operating extends about 100 miles to the west, towards Forks, and 80 miles to the east. Washington DNR, as we mentioned earlier, is our single largest supplier, about 27% of the volume, sold on a stumpage basis. Top 5 suppliers provide over 2/3 of our volume to the region. 30% of regional supplies exported to China through the port of Port Angeles. That number may have changed here recently. I know port activity has certainly picked up here during the pandemic. We consume roughly 76 million feet of logs per year at the mill. This is kind of an overview of where the different flow for logs are around the peninsula. And where we source from. So, we're here on the northern tip, so that's where our main focus is. And of course, SPI and Alta down there on the southern end. And then, where the lines cross, we work well with them to harvest and get the wood where it needs to go. And that's all I have for that presentation. Any questions on that?
Does anyone have any questions of Dave regarding his operations? Grant, do you have anything? You know that world really well. Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
I've sold logs to that mill through Rayonier and through myself for a long time and helped the Crown Pacific guys convince them to bring that mill here. There was lots of wood. That mill is really, really important to the forest products community here in Port Angeles. So, and we appreciate all the capital they spent and all the logs they buy. Without him, it'd be a pretty tough log market around here. So, Ron, thanks for buying logs from us all.
More like your.
Yeah, thanks, Grant.
For that first one.
So I see both Randy and Mike have unmuted. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
I'll let Mike go next.
Well, Randy, you and I have been talking this week about this issue, and especially it was interesting. It was about looks like 30% of DNR is your source of lumber, and is that number changing? Have you seen it? Has it been more? Or has that number been fairly static, or is it decreasing? I guess I'm just curious. There's some talk of, as DNR has been cutting back on their harvest levels. So I'm just curious how that's impacting your mill. And then how are the private companies, will they, if you say, look, we have demand, I mean, are they able to meet the demand if DNR falls short? So I'm just curious how those numbers are historically, how they play out.
Well, I'll give you my perspective, and Ron, you can jump in here with more specifics. As I understand it with the DNR, we do have sufficient log flow into the mill from DNR and all the other suppliers. Rainier, of course, is a big supplier for us, and the others that make up the rest of the volume. Since I've been here, which is just shy of 3 years, we haven't really seen a problem with being able to get enough logs into the mill. We don't have a lot of storage at the mill, so we don't have enough room to even store a week's worth of production at our current rates. When it comes to DNR, I think there's plenty of wood available. Of course, that's, year to year grind of what they're going to make available for sale. A lot of what I understand, I think was mentioned earlier, just the logistics, the paperwork. Even though the sales have been identified to be available for harvest, it's being able to get the paperwork done to be able to go in and actually harvest that timber. So that can be a constraint at times. It hasn't limited us at this point for running out of logs, but it's something certainly on our radar.
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit about it too, Dave. We are, Mike, as you mentioned, DNR is 80 million short this year. Volume, they were targeted 165 million, 165 million. They're going to come in at 78 this year, which is a concern to me on the future, because as you know, those timber sales are 2 years out, and I think right now they have targeted 120 million for next year. Historically, we've been up a little higher, and I know Matt Kaminsky's on the line from AFRC, and he might be able to jump in and give us a little bit more on the details of it. But out here, and Mike, this is something that you might be concerned with, is that and everywhere out here on the peninsula is getting the workers. They're short on employees, and they're not getting the sales laid out is one of the big things that's happening right now. I've talked to him, and I know Matt has, and other people in the industry, about contracting that work out to get these sales laid up and out onto the marketplace. So it will affect us down the road, but as Dave said, we don't have a lot of storage here, but we are getting enough wood. There are times when it's really tight, and that's a lot of times weather conditions and different things. But all in all, and Colleen probably talked about this too, we got another mill or two coming into the area, and that's gonna on the supply side is gonna be a challenge also to be able to get wood to those mills. And if we're going down on our cut, that means there's less availability out there, and the DNR has enough land base out there to supply us wood for a long time, and we just need to get it out onto the market, because we're not the only ones purchasing that wood. We have Harbor Timber, we have SPI, and we also have some outside sources. Murphy comes up here to buy wood because a lot of the other districts are short also. So that means that it pushes price up, and it makes it hard for them to get volume in their region that they rely on from the DNR. So I think long-term, it's going to be an issue that we got to fix. And Randy talks about junior taxing districts with fire, schools, hospitals in our areas, and what's that going to do to them for revenue in a junior taxing district. It's a big issue. So I think on the private side, they've been pretty steady suppliers of ours. I know Rainier will probably go down a little bit over the next couple of years, but that kind of goes up and down. And overall, they're all of our tree farms on the area and the little guys are pretty consistent on wood they put into the marketplace, which we rely on quite a bit too also. So, and we've been moving further, like Dave said, our working circle where we usually buy wood. We have to go outside a lot of times to get enough wood in here. And that's mostly the Doug fir aspect of it. So we'll continue to look elsewhere, but yeah, it would really help if the DNR sold more timber. And Matt, maybe you got something to add to that?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So I because I look at the bigger picture across both Western Washington and the peninsula, I would probably paint actually a little bit more dire situation. The target for the OESF, which is, Western Clallam, Western Jefferson County for DNR, this year was 110 million feet for fiscal year 22, which ends June 30th of this year. We've been informed by DNR that they'll hit about 50. So we're below 50% of target. The non-OESF, which is primarily Eastern Jefferson County and Eastern Clallam County, their target's about 50 million feet. We're expecting 28 to be about the end of the fiscal year target. A lot of that in the east end of Olympic region is due to this old forest issue, which I think many of you will be seeing an announcement later from DNR about moving initially 2,500 acres, eventually up to 10,000 acres in Western Washington into a carbon/preservation program. And so we'll see how that goes. But the DNR report yesterday showed that with DNR, you always have to decide which numbers you're going to use. But if you go with the last report they gave the Board of Natural Resources for fiscal year 22 last July, to what they told the board yesterday, they're going to finish fiscal year 22 in Western Washington. They're going to miss target by 137 million board feet, which I pointed out to the board yesterday is the equivalent of about 2 years worth of volume for a sawmill. So the reality is in Washington and Oregon, the next 2 to 3 years with various issues, both political and ecological, we are going to have, my personal opinion, the fight of our lives to keep the existing infrastructure here, and going to see a challenge to increase infrastructure in both states. So hate to kind of be the wet blanket rainy day, but that's what I've been dealing with for the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I think it's going to be a challenge going forward, kind of trying to figure out exactly where this is all going to shake out.
So Dave, I saw on your slide, you said that 27% of your timber comes from DNR lands by stumpage. So 73% from private lands, is that right? Okay, so a big reduction from DNR for what's being sold off their lands. Are you seeing that the private landowners are stepping up and increasing that, or do they have set rotations where it just can't be increased, or what does that look like?
Well, I can let Ron speak to that a little more specific. We, like I said, we do make up the volume with the timber owners in the region. Like I said, Rainier is a big partner of ours on that, and the other tree farms make up that additional volume. But DNR is certainly a big piece of that, and any impacts on that availability. And of course, with like I said, the port's like a whole nother mill. In some cases, that works well for us as far as log mix, because they'll take these smaller trees that we call production killers that don't go through the mill well, the whips and tops, if you will, and then the larger stuff. So as the trees get too big, we can't process them through a modern stud mill. So we target about 18 inches on the butt. So they get past that, then they have to go somewhere else. And as I understand, the mill starting up, coming back online in Forks, will be able to handle some of that bigger timber. And some cases, as Ron mentioned, they'll be competing for available timber sales. But on the upside of that, that also generates a mix of logs that they may not be favorable for their mix that is good for us. So sometimes more activity and more harvesting can be good for all.
Yeah, to touch a little bit on what Dave has said there, is that we, on the reduction in the DNR, it's going to affect us because of the species mix. Like Dave said, there's a lot of hemlock out in this area, and we have constraints for drying capacity here for that because it takes longer to dry. So that means the volumes available through the private companies at their current levels of harvest. It's just that we would get an influx of hemlock that will slow the mill down from being able to dry it all. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And the DNR historically has a lot more fir available to us in the Clearwater block and down south of Forks and east of Port Angeles area is a big Doug fir area. So anyway, it would have an adverse effect on us with our species mix, over time. There's not that there's not enough wood being produced out there with the private industries. It's just that the species mix is kind of where our bottleneck becomes. And like Dave said, we only take a 19-inch butt diameter, so that bigger log we can't put through our mill. So that's also part of that volume that Matt was talking about, the reduction. And if it gets too big, and we won't be able to utilize that here in Port Angeles.
Mhm. Got it. So Representative Chapman, what do you think, what are your thoughts about DNR's reduction in volume based on what they had predicted they would do just last year? And is there anything that the legislature can do regarding that? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So I did talk with Commissioner of Public Lands. I know Matt and Heath have been talking with her. Look, it's not an excuse, but there is a labor shortage, like was mentioned. That's across the board. That's not just a DNR issue, and it's not. I mean, everyone is talking about that. So she is doing, what they can do to recruit, but they've had a hard time finding people who are trained for the jobs that they need. There's also I think the private sector, the folks who would actually do the logging, that seems to have been, there's some labor issues there as well. There is pressure on her, though. She is rolling out this 10,000 acre, up to a 10,000 acre set aside, primarily in Whatcom County, and primarily driven, as I understand it, is driven by the Whatcom County officials up there around a specific piece of DNR land that has not been harvested for quite some time. And so they've kind of wanted, there was a letter that came in yesterday to my office from the Jefferson County commissioners asking for the same thing around a specific piece of land in Jefferson County that they don't want to see harvested, but they want to see DNR figure out a way to maybe sell some carbon credits. So around the state, there is pressure building from local governments. And as a state official, she's going to respond to local governments as much as possible. Now, she assured me Clallam was not in that. She's not looking at setting aside additional lands in Clallam, but she will be working potentially with the Jefferson County commissioners. And then Grace Harbor County, obviously, that I represent, doesn't have DNR land. So she is going to react. And I think hard to argue with that, hard to argue with local governments petitioning their state official to maybe find some different ways to manage state lands, but she does have a fiduciary. There's also incredible concern. Matt knows this, and he probably knows where the court case is, but there's a potential court case that could change how DNR's fiduciary responsibility could change in the future. And it may, if the court were to rule that it's not just a financial fiduciary. So the issues Randy raised is right, but she has some different pressures being put to bear as an elected official, and she's trying to respond as well as possible. I'm not speaking for her. I'm not authorized to speak for her. I'm just relaying the information that I've been given. And then, the folks, the Jefferson County commissioners putting in a letter, that was a key letter. I mean, that's going to move the needle away from harvest and potentially more to preservation, carbon sequestration. Now, can she generate revenue doing that? That's going to be the issue. And then does the court say that revenue is the primary response, generating revenue, or is there other? So we're in some interesting times, and but I will say that she's responding, listening to all sides. I'll just say that. I think she is taking input from all sides.
So there was a question. Thank you very much, Representative Chapman. There was a question posed early on by Rebecca Miller, who had mentioned that she didn't, know what junior taxing districts were in the county. And so I am going to share my screen. I did upload a report, but if you can see this, these are the different entities. And this comes from the report that I put in the chat. It's a 2017 report, so it's old, but it does show the junior taxing districts. You've got county general, developmental disabilities, land assessment, and veterans reliefs, and then also county roads. But then there are 24 other junior taxing districts, of which, you got school districts that receive funding. I believe there's going to be 5 of them, or maybe 4, but and fire districts that rely upon the revenues coming in. So in total, I think I counted 24 junior taxing districts. And the point that Commissioner Johnson was making is that the junior taxing districts that rely on that funding shouldn't be, because they don't know when it's going to be coming in or not. They don't know if the harvest is going to occur. Basically, because sometimes the plans that they have get derailed because of entities that contest that piece of property being harvested. Is that fair? Is that a good enough recap? So, and I see there is, Jim, do you know, or Matt, do you know about the carbon sequestration plans that DNR has, instead of, so there was some reference to a letter that the Jefferson County commissioners wrote, and they wrote it on the 4th and submitted it on the 5th of April to the Board of Natural Resources, asking that a Beaver Valley sale, I think it was, that it would not be, they wouldn't go forward with that. And that was in Jefferson County. But again, our mills and, so much of our legacy livelihood and our highest private sector wages in our county particularly come from the logging industry. And when that slowed up from the DNR side, it's really it's got a long stream of negative effect for economic issues. But then also you could certainly argue that we have a very great need for housing that's been proven, and it's better to build with a natural resource such as wood rather than steel or concrete that has a lot more carbon emissions. So anyway, that's my timber industry and Clallam for Dummies recap. There's some people on here like Matt that could speak much more eloquently, I'm sure, about those underlying economic issues.
Yeah, I mean, I have to apologize. I need to drop off for another call that I have that started 2 minutes ago. But yeah, when it comes to the carbon, I would just say that we're waiting for 10 o'clock because there's a lot of inconsistencies with what we've heard from DNR. The carbon markets that they talk about, quite honestly, the voluntary market, I'd encourage you to Google a report, a story, Google Lime Timber Carbon, and you'll find their CEO's recent declaration that some of their carbon credits were bogus that they probably sold. Not to say that the carbon market isn't a potential viable path forward, but it's kind of one of those things of there's good ones and there's bad ones. And getting into some of the high value ones are going to be very problematic for DNR. I would note the Jefferson County sale, Beaver Valley sorts, was originally delayed over a year ago because of this old forest issue. DNR removed 3.1 million board feet out of that sale, the oldest timber. The Jefferson County letter basically asked for it not to move forward, look for carbon, look for trust land transfer, which is a whole nother topic. Colleen, that Commissioner Johnson and I could sure probably spend 2 hours addressing this group about going forward. But, you know, Jefferson County, I will note, did not execute what they could have done, which was ask for reconveyance, which would have basically forced it into an open space recreation with little to no revenue coming into the junior taxing districts. And like I said, I need to drop, so there's no time to go into the whole trust land transfer saga. But I think, you know, there are some issues that are starting to be raised on that I think junior taxing districts need to pay attention to. And I'm starting to kind of question, honestly, some of the ethical decisions the department's doing around trust land transfer. So with that, thank you. You all know how to get a hold of me. If you don't, Colleen can connect you to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate it. So there was a question from Brad Griffith regarding where logs go that go to the port. Does one of the port staff want to answer that? When they're shipped out of our port?
Yeah, just really quick, Colleen, about 90% of our product that goes through the log yard on the waterfront is all exported domestically. So that's either going to be sent around the peninsula, or I'm sorry, around the Puget Sound. We do have like big shipments that go down to Coos Bay, and often on maybe some back up to Canada. But the remaining 10% will go into shipping cans for overseas exports, but most of it's domestic.
So are you talking barging in the log rafts, or what about when we have the big log ships come in and those head to China?
Yeah, so
That
the big
M&R
log
does?
ships, yeah, so that timber that comes from the big log ships aren't on that waterfront log yard. So what people mainly align the Port of Port Angeles to the log yard over on the end over towards McKinley is going barging. The other piece, the ships, those are for export internationally.
Mhm.
And none of
And-
that comes off of state or federal land. All that's from private land.
Mhm. I see Erica has a question. Erica?
Thank you, Colleen. I'm trying to turn on my video, but I do know that with Zoom, I appear green and in slow-mo, so for some reason. But anyway, I wanted to ask about, there was reference to the new mills that are coming on, and how is it that, are we concerned that they, given everything that's been talked about this morning, that they will not have the supply, and that there will be some that they need, and that they'll sort of, these mills will cannibalize each other? Can somebody speak to that?
So I can speak to that somewhat. I know that the Sustainable Green team that is creating the mill in Beaver and in Forks, it's not set yet that it would be in Forks, but they hope to. They are really trying to produce a value added product. So a lot of what they would be doing is, harvesting the lumber, the timber, and then creating like a mass timber product out of it. So though they will, the amount of log supply that they are going to be using is, it compared to the number of employees is not as much as you'd think, because they are trying to create a higher value product. And as far as the mill out in Jefferson County at the former Allen logging site, I'm not as familiar with what their plans are, but also with the one that would be in our county, I know they really are looking at all the different elements of the tree. They just recently had sent me some pictures, and if I can pull it up, I'll read kind of a bit about what they say about it. But they are, they use almost every inch of the tree, and do a lot of like bark and
I see.
things like that. So
I see.
and so they'd be taking product potentially from an Interfor or something, you know.
I see.
And
Thank
so
you.
it's not that they're all directly competing for the same product.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
All right, then. Jim Stoffer, you put a link in here about what Commissioner Franz is going to be announcing with some tribal and environmental leaders. Do you know what that is basically going to be all about?
Kind of what Matt said earlier, and it was talked about in the Board of Natural Resources meeting yesterday. And I would encourage folks to watch that on TVW. It's coming up at 9. There wasn't much details presented at the Board of Natural Resource meeting, other than there will be an announcement, press release. And so I encourage folks to watch that. And Commissioner Peach, who's not on here, he represents the timber counties. And I really want to applaud him for his yesterday, because they were going to take a vote on those sales. And because that letter from Jefferson County just showed up there on the 4th, it was prudent to delay that portion of the Beaver Valley beaver short sale until that Board of Natural Resources had an opportunity to discuss that in greater detail with the Jefferson County commissioners. And so I think that was very prudent of Commissioner Peach, who represents those counties, to hold off on that sale till there was more discussion out there. But that's all I have, other than that school districts are a part of these junior taxing districts. So
Yeah, and so the county commissioners spoke on behalf of their, themselves, I would think, but what about their junior taxing districts? Do the junior taxing districts feel the same way, that would be getting revenues from that sale?
Can't speak to that. And I would like to have the Jefferson County junior taxing districts discuss that with their county commissioners. And the school districts here, the 5 of us in Clallam County, do speak to our county commissioners, because we're all partners in these items. So yeah, it's a pretty big, complex discussion happening. So thank you.
Well, let's see, Dave, did you get to share all you wanted to about the work you guys have been doing with Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. Certainly that's one of the focuses for Interfor on several different levels. Part of our values is to support the communities, that we operate in. Also, Interfor has grown substantially as a company, even since I've been here, pretty rapid rate. We're up to just under 5 billion feet of capacity in North America. With that said, we want to continue to have a presence, get our name out there. And part of that is, being more active in the community. For me personally, that's not really my strength. That's why I lean on Chandy quite a bit. I make the decisions and I sign the donations and what have you. But certainly being involved with Habitat for Humanity has been a big deal. To see that impact in person, to go to those dedications and see the families and really see a lot of times when you make a donation or have an impact, you may not see the actual where that goes, but certainly, you know, that's a very important role. Also shared that with some of the other mill managers within Interfor, and so there's been a drive for them to get involved as well. So I know there's some additional support for Habitat for Humanity and some of our other divisions and areas throughout the region. Certainly at the senior level in Interfor, got a lot of attention, certainly on the path that we want to be on. With that said, outside of Habitat for Humanity, you know, we're doing better right now. Of course, the lumber industry is up, so the money's flowing. And during those times, we've doubled our donation budget so we can be more impactful in the community. So a lot of youth programs, you know, I just sent a donation request out for the youth livestock auction, you know, softball teams, BMX track, so on and so forth. A lot of work with you know, local youth and supporting those programs, Boys and Girls Club, so on and so forth. So just really looking for those opportunities and really, you know, getting more involved there to support our local community.
Great. So Colleen.
Yes, this is Colleen Robinson with Habitat for Humanity, and just want to share our appreciation at Habitat Clallam County for our partnership with Interfor. They have donated the framing lumber for the last 6 houses that we've built. That is an incredible savings to our affiliate, to our construction budget. And we're continuing that relationship, and we are so pleased and proud that it's grown to other Interfors all up and down the West Coast, partnerships with Habitat for Humanity affiliates. Dave and his team are amazing to work with. We send the list, it gets pulled, we show up, it's ready to roll, and it makes all the difference in us being able to keep our homes affordable. So thank you to Interfor and Dave Lowry for the leadership of his fabulous team.
Thanks, Colleen. So Dave or Ron, well, Dave, can you talk about, like, kind of walk us through your mill is relative to what happens with the different parts of the tree? So, you know, you get logs that come in, and you've got bark, you've got hog fuel, you've got sawdust. What, you know, can you speak to what happens to all those different residuals as well as the actual lumber that you produce?
Yeah, sure. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. In most mills these days, if not all of them, nothing goes to waste. You know, I can still remember the wigwam burners when I was a kid, where a lot of the waste just was burned off and filled the valleys with smoke. That is no longer the case. So yeah, the logs come in. Typically, the bark on the log is burnt for hog fuel that generates steam for drying. It's a 1-to-1. So the bark that comes off our trees is then we have a boiler here on site where we turn that into steam and then dry the lumber that's produced from the trees. Now, as I mentioned previously, we are kiln constrained. So that portion of our volume that we can't dry on the site itself, we do sell that bark. Herman Brothers takes that and sources that. We have other customers that in the local area that use that bark to fire their boilers as well. So none of that bark goes to waste. The chips, you know, you can see the big pile down there at the port, that a lot of the chips go to paper manufacturers and so on and so forth. I know when I worked for Roseburg, I know the Doug fir fiber is really good for newspaper production. And you know, that makeup that they need even for recycling. And then the sawdust as well is also sold in source. So none of the tree that comes in, any parts or pieces goes to waste. It's all merchandise in some sense. I don't get a lot for the sawdust and the hog fuel, but it doesn't go to waste.
Mm-hmm. And so I know that Quileute Valley School District has they take a waste product as well for their biofuel boiler. I'm probably misstating things here. But do you provide feed? Do they get any of your residuals?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Audrey, do you know where that's
Colleen?
sourced from? Yes,
Colleen, I could answer that.
great, thanks.
So the chips are purchased through Herman Brothers.
Okay.
And that's been a contract with the school district since the new school was built for that project, and it's been real helpful. We don't use a lot of it. I'm on the school board, so kind
you
of
go.
answer that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, no, and it's been working really well,
Mhm.
and but it's not a huge amount.
Okay. But, and so is that from typically Interfor, or is it just Herman Brothers gets it from
Just
many
yeah,
different
from different places. Yeah.
Okay, okay. It looks like, Lowell, you have a question? Do you want to ask your question of Dave?
Sure. Real quick, when I lived in Montana, I went to the sawmill to pick up pellets for for heating my home. So my question to you is, to Dave is, does some of your product could go to making pellets for heating homes? Thank you.
I'm sure it could. We don't, I'm not aware of any sourcing that we do directly to pellet manufacturers. But certainly, you know, the chips and things like that are a good source for that, could be used for it. But I'm not aware of any direct shipments into that market or that value add product.
Got it. Thank you. So does anyone else have any questions or comments that they want to share? All right. Well, if not, I just want to say thank you so much, Dave, and to you and your team. 126 jobs, and if I recall correctly, the multiplier in the timber industry, for every one job that you guys have, there's 1.63 jobs that also support those jobs. And again, they, you know, are the highest private wage sector employer in the county. The highest is government, but the next is forestry. So we really do thank you for what you're doing. And I think the industry has made it's not your grandmother's industry, right? It's so much cleaner, and you really look at resiliency, environmental issues, and try to take care of the land and make the most of every aspect of the tree. So, you know, we're the best tree growing location in the world. And so, you know, having Interfor here and being part of that industry is so critical. So on behalf of the EDC, certainly, thank you for fighting the good fight and producing great product that obviously is really needed for affordable housing, which I think is the biggest issue that our county faces and other entities across the state and the nation face. So Mike or Randy or Jeff, anybody want to make any parting comments? Okay, if not, well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close this off and let you have a few extra minutes for your morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And this will be recorded on our website. And if somebody wasn't able to see it and they wanted to take a look, you can share that with them there. Again, thank you to Ron, Chandy, and Dave for joining us today. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.